Can you hear me all right without a mic? Okay, perfect. So good morning. Thanks for showing up in the first session of today. We'll talk a little bit about visual design for non-designers. Because by now, I think it's a common understanding that design and also visual design is integral to front-end development. But also knowing that a lot of companies don't have visual designers or don't have enough visual designers. So this is just to talk about what visual design is, what it can be, what are principles, and hopefully just talking about things that are applicable also for the non-designers. Just a little bit about myself. I work for Infragistics. We are a US-based company. We provide tools and controls and consulting services to the industry worldwide. And I've been studying that stuff about UX. And this is, if you've been to my talk yesterday, you know that story. The first thing I've ever seen about the topic of usability engineering was that cartoon. They at one time invited alumni to my university that talked about what they did after they graduated from studying cognitive psychology. And they were all like, I work in this hospital, I work in that hospital, I treat these people, I treat those people. And one guy came and just showed that one slide about that comic and said, that's what I'm doing. And I was like, you make money with that? I want to be that too. And so now I'm in this topic now for 15 years and I still love it. So I wanted to start off by saying that who should do visual design? Well, it should be a visual designer, ideally. Because these are the guys who not only have the talent, but they also have the background. There's a reason why people go to school and actually study that stuff, because it's not only talent, it's also knowledge. And so, ideally you would have these people, and yes, they are a little bit distinct from, let's say, the regular developer personality, but it's those people who can handle and should handle visual design. Now, in a lot of cases, a lot of companies I talk with, other people also do visual design. Primarily, actually, the developers. They're just like double chartered with stuff. It's like, you do the development, but you do front end all through. So you also take care about all the usability. You also take care about the visual design. It's all you. And it's really challenging, right? Because as a developer, you have other stuff to do, and also more complicated things to do. It's also stuff that you are better equipped with because you studied whatever computer engineering. Sometimes it's business analysts. Sometimes it's literally the intern next to the kitchen, and Tom in sales, like who is ever available for visual design. And again, if those persons happen to be really, really talented designers, nothing wrong with that, right? You take the best person you get. But the chance is still that there's some room for improvement just because these people may not have the background. So when in doubt, just hire a visual designer or get a contractor in there. But get a professional to do that job because it's really, really worth it. For reasons I will tell you in a second. I just wanted to bring up the, it's blurred for you too, because maybe I'm, all right. Just a definition, a working definition of what UX actually is, because there's so many definitions. I always use this one as the envisioned, expected, or actual experience of the user interacting with a technical product. So it's not the same as customer experience, it's a subset of customer experience. But customer experience is also, you call a support line, or you check in a hotel and the guy at the front desk treats you well on that. That's customer experience. But user experience is really the interaction with a technical product or a technical system. And obviously, you want that experience to be really, really nice. You want to have beautiful people having a beautiful and great time working with a beautiful software. That's what you should have. And then somebody has to make sure this is actually happening. And it's not the one person, it's not the army of one, it's not the one lone developer who does this. Today's world is a very specialized world where developer takes care about code implementation, testing. UX designers take care about the usability, information architecture, interaction, screen level design, and the visual designers there to make everything look professional and in line with brand, and also supporting the interaction design. But by that definition, it also means that whether or not you think you want to invest into this topic or not, if you believe it's important or not, there's always an experience. And if you don't shape that experience properly, there's still an experience. And that experience may be a suboptimum experience, which then may lead to unhappy users and people that hate your product and will not renew licenses or give it back because they hate it. So if that's the case, the good news is you can shape that user experience. And user experience resides on two pillars, where one pillar is talking about usability and one pillar is talking about appeal. And so the world of a visual designer is more here on the appeal side, but they are also involved with the usability of a product. And so, let's see if I have my animation right on. If you don't care about either one of those dimensions, you talk about a product that just is really, really bad because it's not usable, so it's not user-friendly, it's not easy to learn it, it's very hard, clunky to interact with it. At the same time, it also looks like a Soviet tank built on a Monday. So this is the please shoot me quadrant. If you put all your bets on the usability side of the house, then you have a day job product. You know, it's like, to me, the SAPs of the world. So yeah, you know, they work and you do your stuff, but you know, it's not really engaging. You're not really happy with doing this. You would not get up at 2 a.m. at night to actually experience that software, but it does its job. On the other side, if you only make sure that everything like looks really, really cool and professional, you have eye candy, because it may look really attractive and awesome, but there's no purpose, there's no reason for this, and it may be very clunky in the interaction. So where we want to be is in the first love quadrant, where both of these dimensions are optimized. And the really interesting thing is that these two dimensions actually interact with each other. And that's these kind of findings. And you see there's several research papers written about these kind of things. That the perceived usability of something depends on the appeal. So you show a software to somebody, and you don't allow that person to actually engage and interact with that software. You just show that software to them. Then ask them, what do you think? Is this a usable software or is it an unusable software? So you show this and ask about this, and the very consistent result is that people rate something that looks appealing and professionally designed as also usable, even though they have not touched it, just by the look of it. And it's a really heavy sales argument. It's one of the reasons why visual design plays such a crucial role. It's not only for when you actually interact with the system, but it's actually a purchasing decision criteria that something looks good, because then people infer, because it looks good, it's also usable. So what does it, yes please?
Can I raise one question? Who's defining what's looking good, you know? I mean, if I show my grandmother website, she
yes.
says, wow, nice one. And if I show
yes.
a professional UX designer, he said,
yes, yeah, perfect question. I will come back to that a little bit later. But the short answer is that while it's super hard to define what attractiveness is and what aesthetics is, it's very easy to measure this, because you basically do surveys and show UIs or any kind of imagery. And I will talk about like attractiveness of people and faces. You show this to people and you don't ask them to define what aesthetics is, but just ask them how attractive is this what you see, and have them rate it. What a visual designer is there to do is to help create products that are attractive, professional, contemporary, desirable, distinct, in line with the brand, functional, usable, and useful. And so what you see here is like the typical stuff that you would expect, right? Yeah, it's like, we want to make things attractive, right? Professional, yeah, sure, why not? contemporary, yes. Desirable, of course. Distinct is interesting. And functional, usable, and useful is interesting because this here shows the intersection with the interaction design people or the UX or usability people. It's not that the visual designers should work in a silo and would, like, in the end, inherit completely defined, let's say, wireframes and then paint them blue. And that's what a visual designer would do. They actually should overlap further with the usability people in that they can also actually work on the usability part of this. And in that respect, you have then more eyes looking at the issue than just the one pair of eyes from the interaction designer. The distinctiveness, I always think, is interesting because what we currently see with the current design language that we see mainly on the mobile devices, the flat design, it started with the metro design, that they call it meanwhile. It looks very vanilla now because it's so reductionist and simplistic that it's very hard to be distinct. But distinctiveness is another thing that is important here because not only you want to provide your own design language to your product that speaks for you as a company, for example, but also it helps you against other products because then it's clearly visible that, oh, this product looks like exactly a product from company A or B or C. And so what is attractiveness? Super hard to find out. The same would go if you look for aesthetics. And there's a lot of research about that, but I don't really think it's very constructive. And exactly your example, I always bring the same one with my grandmother. Take that. If I showed that stuff to my grandmother, these are like the last generations of Microsoft operating systems, XP, Vista, 7 and 8. And would ask her, so, what is the most attractive one? It would be very hard for her to answer this question because in the end, aren't they all the same? I mean, they are bluish and they show little imagery on there, and what it actually is, she doesn't know. Maybe it's like a poster with like little clippets pasted on this. She would have a very hard time to say what is more attractive. She may have an opinion about the attractiveness per se, but to rank those one over the other, it's very hard to do. While for us, and we know this legacy and we know this is old and this is new, it's this old effect of the car sales that the newest model always is the most attractive one because it's new. So we would probably rate these a little bit higher just because Windows 8 is newer than Vista. But from the actual appeal of this, like what's actually shown, there's hardly any difference. But if you look at the dictionary definition of this, providing pleasure or delight, especially in appearance and manner, well, appearance and manner is look and feel. So now we talk about, oh. Hello? Is it okay? Can you hear me? Okay, so we talk about look and feel, and there we are with front-end design and development. We also see arousing interest or engaging one's thought or consideration. So this was about the appeal side of the UX topic. And the question is, maybe it's not that important to try to define and nail down what is exactly attractiveness and what is exactly aesthetics, but just try to understand what is it in a scene that makes it attractive to people, no matter what the definition is. And a lot research has been done about attractiveness of people, for obvious reasons. Why? Because maybe he wants to get married in his life or her life. And one of these results is this one here, that says something is considered to be attractive if it's easily processable by the brain based on these kind of qualities: symmetry, proportions, and cleanliness. And I will talk about this more. I just want to show this now that you have seen them, and then I'll come back later to them. Because while this was attractiveness of people and faces, in visual design there's certain principles, and there's more and others than these, but these are one of the main ones. And we can map those not only to UI design, but we can also map those to the topic of attractiveness of people. And so one is simplicity, which basically says you should show as much as necessary, but as little as possible. Symmetry, we want to provide balance and stability, and I have examples for all those. You want to provide a visual hierarchy, which is presenting UI elements in a way that informs users about their importance and then guides the user through screens. And you want to provide association, show what belongs together clearly visually. So let's go to the first one, simplicity. When is something considered attractive? The cleanliness of the girl, and I will show this in a second again, maps to simplicity in terms of low complexity on the UI. So that means if something is low in the visual complexity, so it's simple, and it's high in prototypicality, which is it's familiar. It looks like what you expect it should look like. For example, the face of the girl should look like a face of a girl that you would expect, and not the face of the witch, because that's not what you expect. And the same is true on the UI. So here, this is, for example, for this research that was just published 3 years ago. This is kind of like a set of websites that they created to test against. And some of them are more prototypical, like more typical for websites than others. And some have been, and they did this research, like what is rated higher or lower in terms of attractiveness. They called it perceived beauty. And what you see here is that when a website is low in prototypicality, so it looks unfamiliar, it doesn't look like a normal website would, that would be here the green line. It's rated lower in attractiveness, no matter how complex it is. So you need both. You need low complexity and you need high familiarity to be rated as attractive. Or here, if you have something that is highly complex here, it's actually low, no matter if it's high or low in prototypicality. Okay? And so again, going back here, it's the same thing, right? Simplicity, cleanliness. It's a very, very simple phase if you look at this from a technical perspective. In terms of like the skin color, in terms of if you had to remove or reduce the number of colors you have available for her face, you don't need a lot of colors because she has a very evenly phased skin color. While here, you see the winkles, you see all these different colors, the dark lips, the colors of these warts. And the only thing that really looks clean are the eyes and the teeth that gives it away that she's actually not a real witch, in case you wondered. And so this, to me, is the witch. And that's real. This is a real thing that is done in companies today. So I saw this, and when I regained my consciousness, I asked the guy who showed this to me, what is this? What were you thinking? And he's like, no, you don't understand. This is the best thing I've ever done. And it's like, no, I don't doubt that, but why is this so good? He said, no, it took me months to get that data. Whatever that data is, it took him months to get that data. And so I asked him, so now that you got that data, why do you stop there? Why do you just don't further process this and make this look something that people can understand? Because it's a very unique data set, right? Unfortunately, I cannot tell you what it is. It's confidential, but look at the data set. 50% of the data maps to one country, and then the other 50% maps to all these different countries, and 40% of them are all these. So it's very, very unique, and showing it this way is pure evil, because it's super, super cluttered. Even like the numbers are so small that they actually round it down to 0%. So now the majority of what you show here is actually 0. And you have all these connecting lines, and you have all these little pie chart segments that are so many that you have duplications in colors, and it's really, really nasty. And so not only from a usability perspective, it's this craziness because people are not able to actually understand what this is. But obviously, from a visual design perspective, it's also nasty because it's not simple. Now, if this is the witch, this is the beautiful girl. The same data set, just shown a little bit differently. And obviously, this is done like in Tableau, like with a professional data visualization program. There's still complexity in it, right? Because there's still a lot of countries. But now this is taking a histogram approach where we put data, the individual data points into buckets and basically say, I don't really care about the difference between 0 and 10. I just say it's the bucket between 0 and 10 and put them all in here and then actually show the individual numbers here in case it's really important. But by that, I clean up this thing massively. And like you put in some color treatment, whatever, and it looks much better. So witch and beautiful girl. Your choice to make. Is this witch or is it beautiful? And actually, unfortunately, they took down that website. I actually had to go back in Time Machine to actually get it back because if you show this interactive, it's even crazier because everything blinks and runs and the traffic lights are running like crazy. So somebody sent that website to me and I looked at this and again, it's like everything was blinking. Everything was like pure colors, like pure red and pure yellow. It was so strong. And I tried to actually see something there. It's like, what is this? I don't know what I'm looking at. And so it's like, well, you look towards the top left. It's like, is it the Virginia online driver improvement or is it the DMV? I had no idea what this is. And it took me quite a while to understand it's the Arrive Alive Driving Academy, which, it's bad for them because my assumption is their business model is to make money, right? But if people don't even understand what they look at for their public-facing website, that's a problem. And apart from that, like every single usability rule that I'm not talking about today has been violated here as well. It's really insane. And then look at the scroll bar. You could scroll for about 20 minutes south. And it was like random stuff would show up. It was really insane. And then they redesigned this after a couple of years, and the redesign is not really dramatically better, but the scroll area is now a little bit shorter. So okay, that's the witch again. Witch or beautiful girl? Witch? Why is it a witch? Come on, such haters, huh? Yeah, well, the first thing obviously is it looks very outdated, right? And again, if it's outdated, it's really not contemporary. It feels like a leftover from the 80s. Battleship gray stuff. That's the first thing. Yeah, and the other thing is, again, in terms of cleanliness or simplicity, it looks pretty cluttered. It looks like just like people just threw the UI elements on there without any consideration. Like no margins, no padding here. Everything is like squeezed in. Yeah, it's another witch. And I mentioned this yesterday only briefly, but it's so interesting, these two dimensions, right? Usability and appeal, they always interact. So here, you can do all the studies you want, and people will always rate these witchy UIs as bad in aesthetics. And that's an interesting finding in and of itself, but you can also prove that things that are not simple and that are cluttered, that they're actually detrimental to performance. And our headquarters is just outside of Princeton, and Princeton University did this study here and published this in the Journal of Neuroscience, where they put people into fMRI scanners and gave them tasks to do while they had to look at cluttered scenes. So non-simplistic visual scenes, including UIs, but also like photography of stuff. And they came to the conclusion that visual clutter restricts the ability to focus. Why? Because you don't know what is signal and what is noise. Everything is like, hey, there is something. And you're trying to understand, whoa, what is this? What is now important? Where should I look at? What should I start? What is just Chrome and infrastructure elements and what is actually content and important stuff? It's very hard to see. And this will actually then take away focus because you just don't know what you look at. And the second result was that clutter limits the ability to process information. So that's where the performance decrease comes in. And so that means Whenever you see something cluttered, it's bad, period. It's bad for aesthetic reasons, but it's also bad for usability or performance reasons. Clutter is bad, 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 bad. Is this the witch or is that the beautiful girl? Shout it out, beautiful girl, beautiful. And you would think Google knows exactly how many millions of dollars they could make by placing a little ad in here, right? It's all empty. Why don't they use this and clutter this up with ads? Make a Yahoo out of this. And they don't, because from the beginning it looked like this. This is 98, first version of Google. This is what it looked like. Okay, yeah, not as attractive as today, with like drop shadows and like more elements in here. But they really understand that kind of stuff. And they said, no, the cleanliness, the simplicity of this is part of their brand. They will not take away from that, even though they could make much more money. So that's the beautiful girl. And so striving for simplicity is great. UIs that are that simple and also that beautiful and good looking are awesome. But the question is, how simple do you want to make things? Because everybody says, oh, everything has to be super simple. Microsoft with Metro, whatever they call it, meanwhile, said, the Metro design was about no frills, no Chrome, content is king, forget everything else. Very, very reductionist. The second one, Edward Tufte talks about data visualization to increase or maximize the data to ink ratio. Basically saying that every pixel that you use to show data that is not specifically to show the data, but shows something else, is wasted. So reduce that and maximize the data to ink ratio. And then Marissa Mayer from Yahoo, she has this rule for app design that when you count the differences in font size and color on a page, and for every difference, give 1 point. Once you are above 5 points, it's a bad page and you have to redesign it. So think back about this Driver Academy website, all these different treatments of colors and fonts. You get easily above 30 with that. Forget about 5. I mean, okay, this is app and the other one was like websites. But still, again, a very strong call for simplicity. And my point here is that what I completely buy into this, that reductionism is a good thing. Don't overdo it, right? Like Einstein, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. If you make it too simple, and that's what I'm seeing right now, with the flat design, starting with iOS 7, and what Metro actually started. It's so simplistic. You look at the icons, and the icons are so thin and granular. With the stroke width of the icons. You look at progress bars that are so small and are still like two colored that it's really hard to perceive actually the difference in hues because they are so small. I think it's a little bit overcompensating for the 80s and 90s. So actually, you agree? So I actually hope and believe that we will swing back a little bit and make it a little bit more useful again. So simplicity is fine, but don't overdo it. And the other thing is, if everything is like super reduced to the maximum, you quite naturally get those vanilla-looking apps. Because if everybody mimics now flat design, and flat design is again chromeless and everything is super reduced, how do you portray your own brand, your own signature, and your own footsteps in an app that looks so vanilla against everything else? And so this here, for example, I liked because it is very simplistic and pretty flat, but they use their, and I actually should have shown the logo of that company. They use their brand colors on the UI here, even though it's like multi-colors here, and it doesn't make it very cluttered looking, but it gives a little signature element to this. So that's why I like this one. Okay. Let's talk about symmetry or balance. Another reason why she has been rated as very attractive in research is because she has a very symmetric face. If you take a symmetry axis vertically through her nose, you would see that all her facial features are in perfect distance. It's very symmetric to this axis here. The eyebrows, the eyes and nostrils, the ears, the cheeks, everything is symmetric with her. And you can show this very easily by taking that image and then, for example, mirroring only the left side and then mirroring the right side and see what the result is. And this is the result. It's always the same image. If her face was not symmetrical, this and this on the other side would look different. But she has a very symmetric face. This is my face, and you see this effect. And now this explains why I'm actually here and talking to you and not being a model in Paris at this time. Right? So it's very, very distinct looking because I don't have a symmetric face. And the other funny fact about this is that this is actually not one person. And you see this here by the fuzziness here for the hair. This is a superimposition of 15 girls that all individually have been rated as very attractive. And you put all of them over each other, and you see here that while there's fuzziness here on the periphery because of different hairstyles and whatnot, the face is very, very sharp. Why? Because their facial features all have been very, very similar, very, very much the same. Okay, other research, and again, towards the question about what is attractiveness and what is aesthetics. This is a guy from Berkeley in California, and he's one of the people that say, I don't really care what it is. I just care about what people perceive it to be in terms of, you show things to them and ask them, hey, rate the attractiveness of this. I don't care what you think attractiveness is, but just rate me the attractiveness of this visual scene. And so he's been doing this for years and all over the world, and the results are very, very consistent. So for example, he showed a monitor and with a dot. And then he said, hey, you take that dot and you position this dot wherever you want it to fit to make it look attractive. I don't care what you think attractiveness is, but just place it somewhere where you find its attractiveness. It's attractive. And the result was, throughout the world, that the number one position was right in the center, and then it was basically along the symmetry lines here, and the angle bisectors here in the corners. So very predictable in the end, and very consistent. And then he said, okay, and he did this with all kinds of stuff. Sometimes he had pointing shapes that pointed to different directions and used different objects to this. It doesn't matter what you show there. The positions are always the same. Kind of like when you take a photograph and you tend to put the feature element in the middle. And then he took another setup where he said, well, I give you a fixed position because I now put the blue dot wherever I want, and you put another dot where you think it fits best to the first one to make the overall scene look attractive. And again, the result was pretty much the same, that when he put the blue dot here, people put the other dot, the green dot, here, which is mirroring on the horizontal axis, or here mirroring on the vertical axis, or here going through the center here. Very, very consistent findings. And so this result plus these results, and they're all very consistent, say people like, love, and appreciate symmetry. They like structure. And so that, together with the fact that the more clutter you have, the less aesthetic people rate things, just means that between a screen that is like this and this, people always rate this one here as higher in attractiveness. And so I will show you what you can do with that. This is just a website, I also showed this yesterday, that just highlights this whole principle. And this was here a pretty easy task because this company talks about design and development. It's two things, very easy to make this symmetric, right? And they did this very, very consistently through this axis again, and looks pretty fine. But the way we can use this for any kind of UI, even not websites, but actually regular line of business applications, for example, is to use grids. Because the nice thing about grids is that they help you divide a screen into even areas. And for that, you can then use this to create balance and symmetry. And not only does this kind of grid-based design help you with readability and allowing for quicker learning and improving aesthetics. But it obviously also helps with the design time. Because if you look at this dialog here, this is some Outlook dialog, and you see here that a grid was applied. Once you figured out how to lay out, for example, these email UI elements, well, for design time, to be consistent, once you have this and you have the grid, you know exactly how to lay out all the other elements too. So it actually helps you in design time make things faster. Now, there's two different ways you can use a grid. You can use a grid to begin with and say, I first define a grid, and I then lay out all my content towards that grid. And it's typically what you do in websites. Or you actually start with the contents, the UI elements, and then derive a grid that maps to those in the second step. That's what was done here. And the way this works is, you know all your UI elements, all the buttons and the labels and the icons, and then you look for the so-called atomic unit, which is like the smallest distance that you want to use here. And everything else is then the multiplication of that atomic unit. So for example, here, the atomic unit on this one that I drew in here is a distance here between these two elements, between these two buttons, for example. And then the rest is just multiplication of that unit. And I didn't draw all the possible lines in here, but just the major ones. But you see, it's pretty consistent, at least in this area. So here, content first, grid second. Here's the other way around. Here in websites, typically you come up with a grid first, and then you align content to this. So here we have a grid of 7 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns, yes. And the content aligns to this. So for example, this hero image here at the top, it spans 5 of our 7 columns. Or this one here is only 1 column, 1 column. You also see that it doesn't have to be always pixel perfect. So for example, this one here is kind of like spanning 2 columns, but it's a little bit left heavy. That's fine. The overall impression here is it's still that it's very organized and it's very balanced. Now what you can do with that is, next time you wonder if a certain dialogue, a certain scene of your UI is already balanced or not, you can just take that screen, whatever that is, and put in those symmetry lines. And then see how many lines do you get and how evenly are those spaced. So if I do this here, for example, you get these lines. And you see, wow, it's quite a lot of lines, right? Like here especially, they're very dense, but they're also pretty uneven. And that shows you that this can be laid out a little bit better because they're all over the place. Here it's like because the text is left aligned, the position here of the radio buttons are different. So there's a lot of things you can change here to make this a little bit more evenly spaced. That's really practical stuff. Okay, let's talk about hierarchy. So hierarchy was about showing clearly visually that things belong together. And I showed this yesterday too. And actually, okay, yep. The effect here is that people start reading this, even though I clearly told you not to read this. And what happened? It's a hierarchy thing. Because from a hierarchical perspective, this is number 1 and this is number 2. Why? Because first of all, the position, this is on top. So you read this first because we tend to read from top to bottom. Second of all, the foreground-background contrast is higher for this one than for this. Third of all, the text size is larger for this than for this. Fourth of all, this is all uppercase characters, this is all lowercase characters. And fifth of all, here's an exclamation mark and here's just a period. So that just shows how strong hierarchy can be, and that gives you a cool tool to actually guide the visual attention of the user on your UI, to actually show here is what's important, here is where you should look first. And this is, it's a very old principle, predating computers and all that kind of stuff, because the newspapers used to actually follow that rule, so that the headline was the most important one, and it gave you a summary of what's going on. And then you have a subheader, that gives you a little bit more detail, and it's a little bit, here it's quite smaller than the headline. And then you have the actual article with all the details in it. Now, the sad part is that in today's world, this is almost gone. Because if you look at news on websites, their goal is not to inform you about anything, right? Their goal is to get the click count. And that means the title typically says, "She couldn't believe what happened yesterday." And it's like, you have no idea what this means, but it's kind of like, wow, yeah, now I want to know, and you click on it. But in the old times, this was the way newspapers worked. And here it's very, very straightforward, right? What's signal and what's noise? Signal, 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 noise, noise, noise. But if you go into the article itself, like here, what is the signal in here? What's the really important part here? It's very hard to tell because you actually have to read it. And who wants to read, right? So that's the difference here. That's what hierarchy brings to the table. So here the question is, on that screenshot, is there a visual hierarchy? Is it clear to you what's signal and what's noise? And you are now a very specific audience because you are developers, so you can probably handle this better than my grandmother again, or any naive person out there. But to me, I don't see any hierarchy here. To me, everything looks the same. Now, I could follow the instinct and say, yeah, well, it seems to be a computer program. So how about I go to the top left and see what's happening there? Yeah, you could see there's the name of the application, and I see familiar things like a file menu, and then some functions that I can save something. That's all cool and swell, but is that really the signal here? This is just Chrome. This is like any software program would have that stuff. So what is it that should come to me here? I don't see this. And you probably know this better because you are developers. But what's the most important thing here to look at? Don't ask me because I don't know. I have no idea. Because this UI doesn't tell me anything. Remember this one? What's signal here? Signal should be what the company name is, right? Or what we have to offer or whatever, right? But there is no signal because everything is signal. Everything is super strong. Everything is super saturated colors. You have 100 billion different text treatments in terms of alignment, font size, font type. Everything is different. Oops. This here was at one time our project management application that we use to track projects. And you see here, this is showing a level of hierarchy. In that, the Chrome sits all on a dark background, so it frames your content. Within the content, you have so that's not good, because that's a spare machine. 7% is not good. Could I ask somebody, a volunteer who's completely bored about this topic to begin with, to just run out to the front desk and ask them to bring a power cord? Anybody? Anybody? Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Pardon? Yes. Yep. It's their notebook. They should have a power cord. Thank you very much. Okay. Within the content area, we have a larger text here on top. So again, text size, position on top, very prominent location here to say, okay, I can do 3 things. I can do something about users and accounts and custom branding because we talk about settings here. And now it looks like users has been selected because it looks different from these other 2. And in there, I have another subset of things that I can do. I can do user profile, email, password, and whatnot. So while this is not the best looking and the best designed thing in the whole world, it has a sense of hierarchy. Because you have the first level with the frame here, second level, third level, and then the fourth level here is just content. So it's guiding my attention. It's in that respect, it's useful. Because I understand the UI better, I know where to look at, and with that it also is increasing the learnability of the front end. Okay, association. Association Wait a minute. What did I talk about before? Okay, I thought I mentioned this before. Whatever. Association is showing that things that belong together belong together. And you see here, 1923. No computer was done back then. This is all stuff that has been true all the while, independent of computers or not. And these are called Gestalt laws. And what they do is they explain how our visual system perceives scenes and tries to make sense of it. So for example, here I have a number of dots, and some of those dots are empty and some of them are filled with color. So the perception that we have with that is that we see two groups. Hi, do you have power? Okay. Okay.
Is that going to be? That's the only one I had just to hand. I just wanted to see if that worked before the tech.
Where's the?
Is that the power there?
Yep, that fits.
Where's your power source?
What does it say? May not be. Well, what does it? I think that should work.
It's not charging at the moment.
Not?
It's fine. I've asked the tech guys.
Okay, good.
So
Okay.
they'll find something.
Okay, thank you.
Anyways, instead of seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 individual dots, we see two groups of dots. One is the orange dots and one is the empty dots. It's just like our brain always tries to make things simpler. Again, simplicity. Or here, what we see is actually two dots, one superimposing on the other. What we don't see is one full dot and one moon-shaped dot. Because pixel-wise, I mean, if you draw this, there is no line below the other one, right? Actually, this is a full dot and this is a moon-shaped dot, but we assume, because of our knowledge of the world, that there's actually two same-sized dots where one sits on top of the other. Or here, we don't see 4 segments, 1, 2, 3, 4, but we see 2 segments, 1 and 2, because we just assume that they are continued. And here, this is an interesting one. We again have 9 dots, and we see 2 groups of them. But interestingly, not like here, with one being orange and one is filled, but based on proximity, one group is here and the other one is separated on the right-hand side. So these are very old principles. They always have been there. This is the way our brain works. And we can make use of this. Or not. Here. For example, here on this website, Information Week, the principle of similarity, or here, is that we perceive all these things as pretty much the same thing. Why? Because they are at the same location and they look the same. They all have the same size. They're all squared, rectangular rather. They're all red background and have a white font. So we think they belong together. Look at proximity. Even though they are really close to each other, home and software are closer to each other than home to video. And still, we assume that these here belong together because they form here one unit helped by the similarity principle. So whether we do this consciously or not, these principles really work. This one here is closure, so that we perceive this as one tab. This is the enabled tab, and it has all that content. We believe this is like one canvas, rather than saying, well, this is one, and this is just another one that happens to have the same background. No, we see this as closed. So it's, again, very powerful stuff that helps to really signify to a user what
things belong together. And by that, you reduce complexity. Here's our own website, and it's actually not a good example here, and we actually have this on our backlog to change this. On one page, we talk about introducing UX into your process, our customers' processes, with this dark background area. And then we have here blogs. And what it looks like, just from an association standpoint, is that blogs belongs here to this area because it has the same background. It's a dark background with the white foreground color, same as here. While actually, when you scroll down a little bit further, you realize that it has nothing to do with this area, but it's actually a section header. And the section header style is just that it's a black band with the white foreground, which you only understand when you scroll down and actually see, oh, here's white papers. Oh, here's white papers. But at this location here, you don't know this yet because you have not scrolled down enough, and you don't even see that this here, which is the first blog belonging to this here, that this belongs to them because it has a different background color, and there's quite some distance here. This is not like really proximate. So that's not a good design. That's why we are changing this. Okay, let's talk a little bit about typeface in terms of visual design. There's a lot to say about typeface in terms of usability, in terms of readability and legibility, but let's talk about visual design aspects here. Obviously, when you work on a real serious UI, line of business stuff, you want to choose a font that is good for legibility. And legibility is how easy it is to actually understand, perceive, and identify a single character. Otherwise, if you are the guy who designed the next Harley-Davidson riding club for East London, you can do whatever you want, because then legibility may not be that important. But if you do that, it becomes more important to actually have the typeface represent what you or your company are all about. And then you see here this effect, right? This doesn't really make too much sense, right? Because as a proud Harley-Davidson rider, no, you are the easy rider, right? You're the cool guy. You're the guy who wears leather. And it's not like that kind of font that you want to be represented with, right? So here's a clear semantic mismatch between what this is trying to portray just by the font type and what you are all about. Well, this one here makes more sense, right? Love you is really subtle and nuanced, and I hate you is really bold and strong. So this fits much better in terms of the font type that was used to the message you want to convey. Again, usability ground rule applies, including size and contrast and these kind of things, but I'm not talking about those today. Here, just examples from websites. So here, Lamborghini. What's the impression of this font here? Is it a subtle font, a very calm? No, it's bold, it's impressive, it's strong and powerful, and it's exactly what Lamborghini wants to portray here, because that's what the cars are all about. Or here, Cartier, and it's actually so subtle that it's really hard to see now in this lighting conditions. It's hardly easy to see here the small menu items here. But it's a very small, thin, and nuanced font, because this is about now jewelry and not about boldness in terms of horsepowers. Or here, Lockheed Martin, pretty futuristic-looking font that they use there. Why? Because they are saying we are the tip of the spear, we are future, we are the next generation, and so they try to portray that with the font. Obviously, it's more than the font, right? I mean, everything comes together in terms of the imagery. Like here, this kind of semi-transparent UI use, colors and everything. But if you just look at the font portrays the right message as well. Or here, page 4, childcare. Yeah, here it makes sense to use a font like this, which is more playful, non-serious, childish. But You want to use Comic Sans on the line of business application? Good luck. Here, yeah, it makes sense. Nobody would die from taking 10 milliseconds longer to read that font. Who cares? This is not a business application. This is for parents, so that's fine. And again, our which page. And just like go through this and try to see how many different text treatments you can see. They're all over the place. Underlined, non-underlined, different colors, different alignments, different sizes, all lowercase, all uppercase. It's all over the place. Doesn't make any sense. And since I mentioned colors before, let's talk a little bit about colors. In business applications, you want to avoid a scene like this. In business applications, you want to use very few hues and then just vary those in terms of brightness to make it more distinct, because you can use that for functional reasons to base everything on the same hue, but then here varying the brightness to see differences in states, for example. But in the end, don't make it too colorful. See, this one here is very, very light and has hardly any color in it. While for consumer apps, go crazy. And obviously, with Windows 8, they went crazy and beyond. So all colors of the universe, that's fine. But you also realize that they are not super saturated colors. It's not like the 100% red and the 100% green and stuff. It's just more hues to play with, because it's for consumers. This metro side of the house is for the people on the couch in their private time. And here's the flexibility that is trying to portray that. Well, just one slide about if you are chartered to come up with the colors on the UI, what the options are. Well, typically you want to look at a color scheme, and the color scheme can be informed by many different things. If the company already has a branding guideline, they have brand colors that work for print, and they have brand colors that work for interactive media. That's then straightforward, because they will define all the different colors you can use. But in the lack thereof, what you want to come up with is your own color scheme. And there's countless websites that allow you to do this, so that you pick a color and they show you coordinated colors that work good with this first selected colors, so that it's a harmonious overall scheme. But if you're interested in how to do this kind of manually, typically it's derived from this so-called standard 12-part color wheel, where it's in the clock, every hour has one different color, and it goes from yellow back to green. It's obviously a continuum. And one thing you can do is here, you just take 3 of these segments that are next to each other, and you have then analogous colors that play well with each other. So they are really coordinated. Not to imply that your UI actually should exactly be that color scheme. That's pretty rare and unique. Another thing you can do is you can use complementary colors, which is cutting through the color wheel, and you have 2 colors. And what I've seen quite a lot is that people actually take photography and pixel it down, reduce the number of pixels, and by that then use a color picker and then pick the colors from here, because they are also then coordinated. The problem with that is, and you can see this here, is they tend to get really dirty. So you have to have a really good starter image. This is just the one that I took, but you see here that it gets too dirty here. So that is a limiting factor here. But again, you see here the color scheme based on few hues and then variations in saturation and brightness. But don't start with 10 colors right there from the get-go. This is again from this guy from Berkeley with his study series about just throwing things at people and ask them to rate the attractiveness of them. What he found that people, when it comes to foreground, background, color contrast, appreciate a strong contrast in that the ratings for this yellow, for example, are higher when the warm yellow sits on a cool background. While here, the yellows, which is a warm color, sits on a warm background. And the same goes true here for the other for the other case when a cool color sits on a warm background versus a cool color sits also on a cool background. People just like that contrast. There's something to be said about color stereotypes, because colors not only portray feelings, but they are also used in different cultures to signify different things. And some of those stereotypes are more universal and stronger than others. For example, that red is associated with danger and don't do this and fire is pretty universal. But then there is specific cultures where red also means other stuff. So for example, and I don't know this, but I just read about this, or if anybody is here from Egypt, let me know if that's true. But red in Egypt also signifies death. Red in China means happiness, which is why people marry in red and not in white, like here in the West. And red in India is also signifies life and creativity. But again, red is a pretty strong stereotype. And there's studies, like in all over the places in the world to see if people understand a red light on a UI and what it signifies for machinery operations, for example. And they have understanding rates of 98+%. So it's very, very universal. But things like, I don't know, purple and royal. I mean, maybe in the UK that's more known than in other places because you have a royal system. But I would have never thought that purple would be the color for royal. And I'm not sure what it means for UI design either. Right? So this is a pretty weak one. And so this is just to say that colors do have associations, and you can use them on the UI. Obviously, for real-time systems, like a command and control systems, we use them already. With red is alerting to a real problem, and green is everything is cool. And just to talk a bit more about color preferences, again from the same guy and his study group, it's very interesting because if you think about it, a lot of business applications, business websites, their dominant color is blue. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But one reason is that if you investigate the hue preference of people in the world, blue is the number one. Hue preference, blue is number one. Interestingly, purple is number two. That's crazy. Who knew? Interesting. And not only for adult humans, but also for monkeys, pigeons, and even infants. Isn't that cool? Science. And the really interesting thing is how they actually measured that kind of stuff, right? I mean, how would you know that monkeys or pigeons prefer blue, or infants? Well, with the infants, they had those mobiles, when they lie and there's stuff swinging on top of their heads, and they had different colors, and they always try to reach the blue ones. For the pigeons, they had little trapdoors behind which there was food, and they just tended to pick on the blue ones, whatever. It's a preference. You cannot interview the pigeon about the definition of aesthetics, but they preferred blue. So that's one finding why you see blue a lot, because blue is a very liked color. And there's also a technical reason for blue. Well, it's also a primary color, so it's a very pure impression. And what that brings you is it's the only color that you actually can create gradients without making it really dirty. You try to do this with yellow or red, it gets dirty very quickly. And the way you can use this is here to actually establish this hierarchy again on the same hue. So this is a hospital information systems. And I just got this from the internet. I designed this years ago. And somebody took this on and designed this further. I never had the orange highlight. So now they introduce orange, that's fine. But look at the hierarchy here. The darkest blue, the darkest gradient is background. And then you go incrementally lighter to the stage where you actually enter information on the highest interaction level, and it's white. And you see here the gradients from dark blue to here the sliders are lighter blue. The active slider is still a little bit lighter. Then you have this here, then you have the segment that are a little bit lighter, all the way when you have white for the interactive parts. That's another reason why blue lends itself really well for UI design. It also does not have a super dominant color stereotype like red. And its color stereotype is more like, it's reputable. That's why all the banks are blue on the web. And it's perceived as also neutral, which is the flag of the United Nations is blue. Obviously, I talked about contrast in terms of preference. People like warm colors on cool backgrounds and the other way around. But also, from a functional perspective, you want to make sure that you have safe contrasts, because if you have really bad combinations of blue and black, for example, it's just hard to see things. And there's also guidelines about this for the web. For example, the web content accessibility guidelines that give you also numeric guidance as to how high color contrast should be. But this is just an overview about safe contrast, safe color pairs. Okay, let's talk a little bit about color perception. I'm amazed that this is still running. Did he change this now again? Whatever. Does anybody see a circle? Yes? Who doesn't see the circle? Okay. Does anybody not see a square? There has to be at least one. Aha, aha, aha. Oh. All you don't see is the square? You are aware that you're a little bit color challenged? Okay. Anybody was aware of this? Wow, this is more than I expected, but that's awesome. There's actually a square in this area, but people that have red-green color perception issues don't see that. And red-green is the most prominent of the color deficiency incidences that there are. In general, for Caucasians, Asians, and Africans, here are the numbers. Color blindness, like we just call it color blindness, even though it's a little bit more nuanced, is normally pertaining to men. For women, it's pretty rare. But, the Caucasians are the worst with that. So 8% of white men have some sort of color perception issue. And of those, and I only have the numbers, unfortunately, for the Caucasians, of those, the problem is red and green. And that's why it's always the square that people don't see. Because everything else is really, really, really rare. Like somebody who has issues with perceiving blue and yellow, 4 out of 100,000 men and 2 out of 100,000 women. Pretty rare. And then total color blindness, you don't see any hue information, it's just shades of gray, is same order of magnitude here. So that means when we talk about color perception stuff, we talk about red-green. And that is an interesting because, if you are chartered to do a chart like this that follows the traffic light metaphor, like this is testing equipment, red would be a fail, and yellow would be an arrow, and green would be a pass. And you want to design it in a way that also people that have red-green perception issues, that's really hard to do then because you can simulate this. And let me ask you, everybody who had raised the arms before, this should look pretty much the same for you, right? It does not? They look different? Okay, not sure why that is. But the problem is with the color deficiency, it depends on the cones we have in the eyes. We have 3 types of cones. And the combination of the weaknesses of these cones can make this look pretty much anything because the combination is so high. So it's really hard to simulate this. But this is from a professional color deficiency simulator where you can just try to see and hope to see what the effect of the red-green deficiency may be. And you see here that now everything looks like yellow. And now it's really hard to tune this that it actually looks distinct. So this was actually the end result where they do look distinct now, not on hue, but just on brightness. And what you can do to be really, really safe is doing something like this. This is IDERA. And actually, this has been from 2007, so it's pretty old, but they used our controls to build this thing. And they won a usability award with this. And look at what they did to be safe with color perception issues. They actually triple-coded their information. So they had hue, they had red, yellow, and green. They had shape information, square, triangle, and circle, and they had an iconic identifier, the cross, the exclamation mark, and the check mark. So that even when you cannot perceive the colors correctly, you still have two other modes of code to understand that this is, a good thing or a bad thing. And have you ever heard about the golden ratio? Because I get a lot of questions about that. What did you hear about it, or what does it ring in your brain about?
1.6 something. It's the ratio when you divide a
Yes.
rectangle that everyone chooses.
And why do you care? Why is it important?
Because it's psychologically appealing.
Okay, aha. Here's another principle that has been proven like for literally thousands of years to actually work in terms of aesthetics. And exactly, you had the numbers right. The proportion of 1 to 1.62. 617. Perfect. It's like pi. How many pi numbers can you say? Has been shown as perceived as aesthetic 4,000 of years. Since the ancient Greeks, they built their temples on that principle. When the first books were printed in the medieval times, the page aspect ratio followed the golden ratio. Apple's logo was built on the golden ratio. Guess why the white screens that we have are of that proportion? 16:9, 16:10, it almost perfectly fits that proportion. Or, watches that where these dials here, everything that is round is built on the golden ratio. It's still around today. And still seems to work. And in case you wonder how to create a golden rectangle, here's how you can do it, but it's really not that important. Just wanted to show this to you. And we actually use this at our work. Our visual designers, what they do is it the sign to me that I'm over talking here? We do style tiles. So once we identify with a customer what the branding attributes are that they want to portray on their software, we create those kind of style tiles where we just try out different treatments of things, text treatments and interactive element treatments and graphical treatments, and we just give them a set of these style tiles to say, does this portray those experience attributes that you told us about? And for example, these style tiles, the layout of those, we also follow the golden ratio in that this here is 1, and this side here is this is 1, this is 1.62, and also this to this, this to this, this to this is all the golden ratio. Smashing Magazine does the same thing. It's also the golden ratio between here, 1.62 to 1. And even icon, we created these icons using this kind of icon grid that again follows the golden rule, and you can really make this very, very consistent through that. And I think they came out really, really nice. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about is talking about the process. Because these were all Snapple facts, nice to know, but they all, live within a certain process. And that process goes like this, where in the end we need something that is, completely styled. And a lot of time, though, is spent during the development process on what we call interaction design, which is information architecture, which is screen-level design in terms of layout and content and interaction and navigation and states. Pretty much anything but the visual design. And the owner of that is typically an interaction designer or a UX architect or a usability specialist, whatever their name is. Typically, the owner here is not a visual designer. This is not to say that visual designers would not be engaged during that phase. They are. They work together hand in hand with the interaction designer. But the reason why typically this is owned by interaction design is that these persons also have done the previous work about analysis and user research. So they have the background, the reality about what the product shall do and accomplish for what kind of context in their heads already, which equips them to also do that kind of work here. And so at some point, though, this is not enough. This is not a real product. This is just like defining structure. The whole product is only done when you have the proper visual design treatment on it as well. And so the way we do things, for example, is that we, as the first thing, talk with the stakeholders about, tell us about your brand, tell us about what you stand for. Tell us about, so what we are actually going after is, with this first step, find your style, is what are the experience attributes that you want the UI portray? And the way we do this is we give them imagery. And these are like, not all of them are UIs. You see here, most of them that are shown here actually are not UIs. They are just like physical objects. They are buildings. They are textures. They are paintings. They can be anything, like a clock. And we do these workshops with stakeholders from these companies, marketing people and C-level people, and have them basically vote on imagery that they like. And then we give them red stickies for images that they don't like. And then we take those that have like really high feedback rates, that have like a lot of these buttons, like this one, and we discuss them and say, so why do you like those? From the perspective of your company, what it shall represent. And then they say things like, oh, we are all about precision. We are all about, like, for example, the Lockheed Martin, precision, cutting edge, futuristic, precise, these kind of things. And we discuss then also the imagery that they don't like because they feel it doesn't like fit their brand. And then we derive from these are the red dots. And then do some affinity diagramming and like all the discussion points, and we put it all together. And then we get this list of attributes. And it's really interesting because some you can infer from the company, right? Because you know if it's a large company, their brands. But if you have a list of things like, again, precise and technical and accurate and scientific and whatever, then you have like as one of those attributes suddenly fun among all these others. That fun really sticks out. And you have like try to understand, what do you mean with fun? How does fun play into your brand? And so here's more of this. And then we try like to come up with like one denominator, like one word that would represent the comments that were done for certain screens. So here this was about structured, this was calm and cool, this was bold, this was classy. And then based on that, we can then, for each one of them, come up with like kind of like mood boards and imagery that just speak very strong to those. So this was for crisp and structured. These were all the attributes that were mentioned. And then we try like to come up with these style tiles and say, does this impression now, this way to treat text, this way to treat graphical information, this way to treat interactive elements, does this treat crisp, does it hit crisp and structured? And then we go through iterations on that one. Or this would be the classic, the baseball glove and the leather shoes and the classic look of the watch. And this would then the style tile that would apply to that. For example, by having a serif font. This would be bold and colorful. That were the attributes. And this would then be a style tile that could map to that one. And so that is then a vehicle to get not only the buy-in of stakeholders, right? Because then you avoid to having these discussions after the fact. Then you show them the first real pixel exact actual screen, because obviously these are not screens; they're just stylistic treatments, like little studies. But also, it helps the designers to better understand, what the application should portray, because again, in the times where you have flat design available that tend to look all the same, it's important to know what is the message, what should be portrayed there, other than just functional aspects of this, like that you want to highlight, for example, hierarchy. But how do you actually show the brand, the signature, the personality of a UI. And so then with that, you have the structure. The structure, should be defined at that stage. So again, you have content, navigation, information architecture, all this defined. You then also have the basic principles of treating an UI in a visual way, and you can take them both together and then create the actual pixel perfect screens. Because obviously those wireframes are not pixel exact either. They're just like, yeah, whatever. It's like maybe the proportions are okay, but they're not pixel exact in terms of the exact alignment and the margins and the padding between text and these kind of things. So it's this coming from or owned by interaction design, this is owned by visual design, and then typically the visual designer puts them also both together and does the final screen. And that's all I wanted to say, and thank you to the notebook for not giving up on me. And if you have any questions, comments, war stories, let me know. No? Do you think? Yes, please. All the slides and from all presenters were delivered to the organizers. They will, I don't know how, but they will spread them around. Probably they put it on the website. They also have recordings in most of the rooms. So my assumption is after the fact, you will find all of this on the website. Was that helpful? Okay, thank you very much.
Interacting with a technical product. So it's not the same as customer experience. It's a subset of customer experience. But customer experience is also, you call a support line or you check in a hotel and the guy at the front desk treats you well on that. That's customer experience. But user experience is really the interaction with a technical product or a technical system. And obviously, you want that experience to be really, really nice. You want to have beautiful people having a beautiful and great time working with a beautiful software. That's what you should have. And then somebody has to make sure this is actually happening. And it's not the one person, it's not the army of one, it's not the one lone developer who does this. Today's world is a very specialized world where developer takes care about code, implementation, testing. UX designers take care about the usability, information architecture, interaction, screen level design, and the visual designers there to make everything look professional and in line with brand, and also supporting the interaction design. But by that definition, it also means that whether or not you think you want to invest into this topic or not, if you believe it's important or not, there's always an experience. And if you don't shape that experience properly, there's still an experience. And that experience may be a suboptimum experience, which then may lead to unhappy users and people that hate your product and will not renew licenses or give it back because they hate it. So if that's the case, the good news is you can shape that user experience. And user experience resides on two pillars, where one pillar is talking about usability and one pillar is talking about appeal. And so the world of a visual designer is more here on the appeal side, but they are also involved with the usability. Can you hear me all right without a mic? Okay, perfect. So good morning. Thanks for showing up in the first session of today. We'll talk a little bit about visual design for non-designers. Because by now, I think it's a common understanding that design and also visual design is integral to front-end development. But also knowing that a lot of companies don't have visual designers or don't have enough visual designers. So this is just to talk about what visual design is, what it can be, what are principles, and hopefully just talking about things that are applicable also for the non-designers. Just a little bit about myself. I work for Infagistics. We are a US-based company. We provide tools and controls and consulting services to the industry worldwide. And I've been studying that stuff about UX. And this is, if you've been to my talk yesterday, you know that story. The first thing I've ever seen about the topic of usability engineering was that cartoon. They at one time invited alumni to my university that talked about what they did after they graduated from studying cognitive psychology. And they were all like, I work in this hospital, I work in that hospital, I treat these people, I treat those people. And one guy came and just showed that one slide about that comic and said, that's what I'm doing. I was like, you make money with that? I want to be that too. And so now I'm in this topic now for 15 years and I still love it. So I wanted to start off by saying that, who should do visual design? Well, it should be a visual designer, ideally. That's one of the reasons why visual design plays such a crucial role. It's not only for when you actually interact with the system, but it's actually a purchasing decision criteria that something looks good, because then people infer, because it looks good, it's also usable. So what does it, yes please?
Can I raise one question? Who's defining what's looking good, I mean, if I show my grandmother website, she
Yes.
says, wow, nice one. And if I show
Yes.
a professional UX designer, he said,
Yes. Yeah. Perfect question. I will come back to that a little bit later. But the short answer is that while it's super hard to define what attractiveness is and what aesthetics is, it's very easy to measure this, because you basically do surveys and show UIs or any kind of imagery. And I will talk about like attractiveness of people and faces. You show this to people and you don't ask them to define what aesthetics is, but just ask them how attractive is this what you see, and have them rate it. What a visual designer is there to do is to help create products that are attractive, professional, contemporary, desirable, distinct, in line with the brand, functional, usable, and useful. And so what you see here is that the typical stuff that you would expect, right? Yeah, it's like, we want to make things attractive, right? Professional, yeah, sure, why not? Contemporary, yes. Desirable, of course. Distinct is interesting. And functional, usable, and useful is interesting, because this here shows the intersection with the interaction design people or the UX or usability people. It's not that the visual designers should work in a silo and would, like, in the end, inherit completely defined, let's say, wireframes and then paint them blue. And that's what a visual designer would do. They actually should overlap further of a product. And so, let's see if I have my animation right now. If you don't care about either one of those dimensions, you talk about a product that just is really, really bad, because it's not usable, so it's not user-friendly, it's not easy to learn it, it's very hard, clunky to interact with it. At the same time, it also looks like a Soviet tank built on a Monday. So this is the please shoot me quadrant. If you put all your bets on the usability side of the house, then you have a day job product. It's like, to me, the SAPs of the world. So yeah, they work and you do your stuff, but it's not really engaging. You're not really happy with doing this. You would not get up at 2 a.m. at night to actually experience that software, but it does its job. On the other side, if you only make sure that everything looks really, really cool and professional, you have eye candy, because it may look really attractive and awesome, but there's no purpose, there's no reason for this, and it may be very clunky in the interaction. So where we want to be is in the first love quadrant, where both of these dimensions are optimized. And the really interesting thing is that these two dimensions actually interact with each other. And that's these kind of findings. And you see there's several research papers written about these kind of things. That the perceived usability of something depends on the appeal. So you show a software to somebody, and you don't allow that person to actually engage and interact with that software. You just show that software to them. And ask them, what do you think? Is this a usable software or is it an unusable software? So you show this and ask about this, And the very consistent result is that people rate something that looks appealing and professionally designed as also usable, even though they have not touched it, just by the look of it. And it's a really heavy sales argument, because these are the guys who not only have the talent, but they also have the background. There's a reason why people go to school and actually study that stuff, because it's not only talent, it's also knowledge. And so ideally you would have these people, and yes, they are a little bit distinct from, let's say, the regular developer personality, but it's those people who can handle and should handle visual design. Now, in a lot of cases, a lot of companies I talk with, other people also do visual design. Primarily, actually, the developers. They're just like double chartered with stuff. It's like, you do the development, but you do front end all through. So you also take care about all the usability. You also take care about the visual design. It's all you. And it's really challenging, right? Because as a developer, you have other stuff to do, and also more complicated things to do. It's also stuff that you are better equipped with because you studied whatever computer engineering. Sometimes it's business analysts. Sometimes it's literally the intern next to the kitchen, and Tom in sales, like who is ever available for visual design. And again, if those persons happen to be really, really talented designers, nothing wrong with that, right? You take the best person you get. But the chance is still that there's some room for improvement, just because these people may not have the background. So when in doubt, just hire a visual designer, or get a contractor in there. But get a professional to do that job, because it's really, really worth it. For reasons I will tell you in a second. I just wanted to bring up the, it's blurred for you too, because maybe I'm, all right. Just a definition, a working definition of what UX actually is, because there's so many definitions. I always use this one as the envisioned, expected, or actual experience of the user.